Good afternoon. My name is Stuart Rosebrook. I'm the director here at Charlotte Hall Museum. And today is really one of those great days here. You know, we bring our community together to enjoy a lecture. But we got a special lecture here today. And I was thinking about it. It's over 10 years ago, I met Brad Courtney here at Charlotte Hall Museum when the Arizona History Convention was hosted here by Charlotte Hall Museum and was staying here in Prescott. People had gathered around the community. I was out here from Iowa at the time, and I met Brad, and this gentleman has an infectious love of history. He has an infectious love of history that he likes to share. And I think that's why we're so blessed to have him as part of our community. He and his wife, Wendy Courtney, who's here, will be selling books afterwards. So if you're interested in buying one of their books, they're for sale. But you know, when you have someone who moves into your community and sees an opportunity not just to be inspired by history, but be inspired by it and then create something that he shares and shares that passion about Whiskey Row, about the history of Prescott, and now the history of one of our most infamous characters, Doc Holliday, and his girlfriend, Kate. Their story is notorious and legendary, mythic and real, and our friend Brad Courtney is here to find and bring the real truth to the story, if it can be found in the ether of the mythology of Doc Holliday and Kate. Thank you, Brad.
Yeah, like Stuart said, I came here. I promised myself not to talk too much about myself today, because that really eats into the time, and I want to get to the part where I got some new stuff about Kate to show you, because I've done this presentation with Doc Holliday in Prescott many times. It sells out every time. I was thinking yesterday, I was out doing my run, and I was thinking about the days when I was a Colorado River boat pilot and guide down the canyons, and I would people would be coming on, getting on the boat, you know, and I'd say, well, God, you guys all came to see me. That's kind of the same thing we have happen here. Right? You put, the saying is, you put Doc or Earp into a title, they come, you know, like Field of Dreams, you know, you put Doc and they come. Jim and Barb, you asked me to sing the other day. I didn't do it, and I've been debating whether to do it. So, you know, I'm a singer-songwriter, so I'm going to try. The other day, it just didn't work out. But I wrote this song a few years ago, and it's about going down to Whiskey Row all dressed up. And I had this chorus in my mind for years, and I couldn't put verses together until I met Wendy. And I had this fantasy walking down the row with someone you love, you know, because I saw so many people doing it, and she made it come true. So here goes. If I stop halfway, you can go ahead and clap, because I'm not going to go any further. But it goes, and a good version of it is on YouTube. We actually recorded it. How many of you know Johan Glidden? Some of you, you know Johan. He was the Prodigy. He's now in Nashville. But he recorded it and did all the work and made me sound good. But the song goes, let's go down, take me down. Let's go down to Whiskey Row. Maybe I stop there. So far, so good. Let's go down, take me down to where the wild at heart go. Let's go down, take me down. Let's go down to Whiskey Row. Let's go down to where the wild stories grow. Let's go down, oh, take me down to Whiskey Row. Thank you. I'm going to leave because that's as good as I can. Thank you very much. It's great to see everybody. Some of you are repeat listeners, and I do got some new stuff for you. You didn't memorize it anyway, but Doc. I've done Doc Holliday in Prescott lectures all over town, and it always brings a crowd. But you can't tell the Doc Holliday story without Kate, and you can't tell the Kate story without Doc. They've been linked together forever in history. So I'm going to try to be very efficient and get to the point where when Kate was in the Pioneers home, I think get to my point in the right way, over that way, it was more significant than one would think. As a matter of fact, to the whole Earp world history, it was very important. And the thing is, this is part's fascinating to me. When she was here, there weren't people going up to see Doc Holliday's girl. They didn't know that was her. A very small handful of people knew who she was, that she was Doc Holliday's girl, and she wasn't broadcasting it. So that story to me is very interesting, so I want to get to that. I was going to name the book, Doc and Kate, A Love Story. Notice the question marks? Love story? It's not one that gives you a warm, fuzzy feeling, but they loved each other. But and when she wrote her memoirs, there's no real warm feelings toward Doc. I don't know if you know this, but she actually wrote in her memoirs about spending 2 nights with Johnny Ringo, Doc's enemy. And she expressed very loving feelings toward him, but you didn't see that for Doc. She said, I loved him, but that's all you see. So Doc and Kate, a love story, but you just can't separate them. And their story is actually fascinating. They were two fascinating people who never thought they were going to be world famous like they are. Some real quick background, and a lot of you know this already. I moved to Prescott part-time 2011 out in the mountains there. I was teaching in Phoenix, but every chance I had to come up to get out of Phoenix, and I remember every time I'd come up, I'd get out of the car and I'd feel that cool air, and I go, oh God, this is so wonderful. Found out I could retire in 2012, and I was actually writing another book based on my master's thesis, and I was planning on writing that, but I got here, and I'd been coming up to Whiskey Row for years, like people do. When you visit, you go to Whiskey Row or the Plaza. And I kept hearing these stories. And a lot of those stories, you could almost, it was pervasive. You could feel the Earps and Doc Holliday there because of all the stories. And I was thinking I want to read about my new hometown, some really good books in Prescott. But I went to look for a book on the history of Whiskey Row, and there weren't any. And I thought, I'm hearing all these stories. Don't stories come from books? And I found out not necessarily. So I decided I was going to write the book I wanted to read. It was going to be a great big old book. But I found a publisher, they found me actually, that could do them in a series. And I went over here to the archives. Every time the archives door were open, they let me in. And it got to the point, I remember one time I was sitting there, I was there so often, I remember a guy named Scott was at the desk, and someone called to ask him how's it going over there, and who's there? She goes, oh, nobody, just Brad. That's the way it got. And Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and sometimes Saturday, I'd go in and I'd sit in front of the microphone reader and finding these stories. And I started in 1864. I started going through every newspaper that had been written, the Arizona Miner, and at one point it became the Miner and the Courier. But I did it chronologically, and I kept waiting for Wyatt Earp to show up in the newspaper, some news story about him. Never came up. Doc Holliday never came up until, guess when they came up finally? When they were in Tombstone. And that whole thing, the whole shootout, 75 feet from the OK Corral, we measured it. 75 feet from the OK Corral, they were reporting on that. And there was a lot of news about Tombstone in general. But when the Earps came here, and Doc, he wasn't famous. You know, you see the movies, you get this impression that he was just this walking legend where he went. But it just wasn't the case. And same with Doc. They did not become famous until Tombstone. And if Tombstone hadn't had that whole drama there hadn't happened, we wouldn't be talking about that today. But so I wrote the books, and I kept researching. There's 14 years of research in my head to get out, so I got to be careful because these pieces of information pop up in my head. But I kept researching, and I kept finding all these connections. My best friend here in town is Constable Ron Williams, who's a Tombstone fanatic. We started noticing, this person was here before Tombstone, this person came after. And eventually he wrote a whole outline of it, and it kept nagging at me for quite a while. I was, again, writing something else. And finally I go, I gotta write this Prescott Tombstone Connection thing. And I'll tell you how that went, but we've actually are starting our own organization called the Prescott Tombstone Connection. Some of you went to our Prescott Doc HolliDaze, and that was very successful. We're trying to build on that, but we're going to form an organization, forming partnerships and everything like that. We'll have forums and publications and all that. But so I started writing. I chose to write first about Doc Holliday in Prescott, the chapter. I was going to write a chapter about Doc Holliday in Prescott. And it just kept getting bigger and bigger. And then I'm sitting over here in the archives. I'll probably get one or two hands, although she's very active here. How many of you know Sue Kissel? It's always just a few people. She's a behind-the-scenes girl, but an amazing researcher. Historians for years have been wondering, where was the house that Doc lived in? It was Richard Elliott and John Gosper. Where did he live? Where was that house when he was here in 1880? And I gave Sue the basic information, who she lived with, where the house was. I showed her the census. We'll come to that. And I was researching something else, and like this happens all the time, researching something else and you find something else. But she disappeared, didn't tell me what she was doing. Next thing you know, she was coming up from behind and she handed me the property records of Richard Elliott, the lots where his house was. And I looked at her, I go, you did it. And so I get a lot of credit for finding that, but it was actually her that did it. And she never shows up because I embarrass her, because I always credit her. She's just a great person. But I had it in my mind, I go, this is worthy of a historical marker. And I'd never done that before, but we did a fundraising. And my idea, you see what happened. Yeah, that's you. Let's see. A lot of people were there. I can see you. I can see you. But my idea, I went to the Western Heritage Center. I said, why don't we just do a little small unveiling event? And then we'll come back to the Heritage Center. I'll do a little lecture. Someone goes, nah, let's just do it bigger. Next thing you know, I did, it sells out every time with Doc. 2 sellout lectures, and it was announced, did a newspaper article, and look what happened. People sometimes ask me a legitimate question, what did Doc Holliday do to deserve a historical marker? He didn't. He didn't do anything to deserve it, but what does he do with his legend? That's what happens with Doc Holliday. That's what he's done for the town. Some businesses make up stories about Doc being here and there because it brings in people, but maybe I'll get to that part too. But that was just an incredible experience. People came from all over, and then we did it again this year. Oh, what's a slideshow without showing my kids? Those are my kids. My pride and joy is our pride and joy that we did there. But the markers behind the Bashford Courts there, real proud of that. And then this year we did it again, and it was successful. Inaugurated a history forum, which Stuart was the MC of, a fantastic MC, by the way. And we had a couple hundred people show up, and we're going to do it again. We're forming some partnerships. Had a Victorian party afterwards that was really fun. That's the Kate Look-alike contest. I don't know anybody wanted to look like Kate, but maybe in the movies. But that's actually, she's from Tombstone. Her husband, Jimmy Green, is a really fantastic artist. But came up from Tombstone. She was real happy about it. And we're going to do it this year. Wendy, my wife, is actually the director of that. She's already handed them out, but she's the one that you want to talk to about that. But put it on your calendar. We're making some big plans. I wrote for the unveiling event, I wrote this 20,000-word booklet. Like I said, the theme kept getting bigger and bigger on Doc Holliday, and that's the basis of the book that I'm working on, which I'm calling the working title, Doc Holliday and Kate at the Crossroads. I call it the Crossroads because that was the theme that just kept developing. It was more significant, back up a little bit. Gary Roberts, who wrote some of you probably read it, the big thick book on Doc Holliday. He's the Doc Holliday biographer. 7 paragraphs about Prescott in his book. And he actually wrote me, he goes, this is much needed. Came to Prescott, actually said that at one point. But it was the crossroads time for there, and I'll get to that but also for Kate. And it was a crossroads for them as a couple. So that's the working title. I'm working on it. It keeps, the closer I think I'm getting done, the further away it is. So in 2009, the Arizona History Convention was held here, I believe up in the resort. Gary Roberts came. There was a panel of 3 that came. They give you like 20 minutes to talk, so you're like, blah, 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 real quick. Gary Roberts, Ann Collier, who's done some great work on Kate, and another guy named Robert Palmquist talked about Virgil. Of course, the headline was Prescott was true home for Virgil Earp, and that is very true. He said so himself. He wrote, there was a guy named James Dodson who deserves a historical plaque. I just don't think anybody would come to it because his name's not Doc Holliday. But he's the guy, if you get my book, he's the guy that tamed Whiskey Row. He was a good friend of Virgil Earp. After the Tombstone stuff, Virgil wrote James Dodson and said that he was planning to come back to Tombstone after all that, that nonsense. And but he, in that letter, he said that Prescott's the only place that felt like home, and he did. He came back, as you probably know, years later, stayed for another 9-10 years. He would have seen Prescott as it looked in 1879, before the fire. He would have seen the fire. He would have seen what it looked like after the fire and the rebuild. He's the only one, you've heard about the Earps going to the palace. He's the only one that could have actually gone there, and I'm certain that he did. Why would you not go to the palace if you're Virgil Earp? But just as true is, more than any other place, Kate belongs to Prescott. And I'll get into the reasons why, but number one, she came here with Doc. They were here probably just a few months. That's a mysterious time right there. How long they were here, we don't know. We don't know where they stayed. But then she came back and lived and died up in the Pioneers' home. That's what I want to talk about, because her time there was way more significant than she came and lived out her life and she died. And of course, she's buried in the cemetery, the Pioneers' home cemetery. That's what she looked like when she was here. She was 81, I believe, when she entered the home. She'd been described, she was almost deaf. She had a hard time walking. When she lived down in southern Arizona, she'd been stung by a scorpion. And that gave her fits for the rest of her life. She was sitting with her leg up all the time. But she wasn't walking around Prescott. If some people have said that, she must have walked around and everything. And I'm big-nosed Kate, but nothing like that happened. She was pretty much not invalid, but she wasn't real ambulatory, I think that's a word. And as you know, she's been portrayed by some great actresses. Isabella Rossellini, even Faye Dunaway. I don't know if you've seen, there's a movie called Doc. It's terrible. I won't recommend it, but she made a good Kate. She played Kate as kind of a tortured soul, and I do see her that way. Everybody's favorite. How do you say that, Stuart? Pacula?
Oh, right.
You don't know either, do you? Joanna Pacula. I thought she was fantastic. Played a lot of Val Kilmer, and everybody. There's nobody that doesn't say that he was the best Doc Holliday ever. Even if it wasn't true to his character, yeah, he put Doc on another level. He was fantastic. I met him actually by accident in a Tombstone. I was on this balcony and I saw this guy come up all of a sudden and he was waving at people. I'm going, who's that? And then he walked by me and that was Val Kilmer. But it was when he had throat cancer, so he couldn't talk. But he seemed like the nicest guy. So it all started in 1879 when the Silver Strike in what is now Tombstone began, and there were report after report after report in the Prescott papers about the Silver Strike. And at first it was like, this is fantastic, especially for our chance for statehood. And as it went, though, people started going that way. Prescott had just gotten the capital back. They wanted to keep it. Everybody's leaving to go down south. I looked at one report, and Yavapai County had 5,000 people. What became Cochise County, but southern Arizona had 17,000 people. And people were going, why is the Capitol here and not down there? So there was a big fear of losing the Capitol to Tucson or even Tombstone. But so after a while, the reports were real positive, and then they got real negative. That's nothing. It's overrated. Don't go there. And you'll see here a report of when Virgil went. There was actually made fun of the Tombstone thing. There was a big fear of losing the Capitol, and just it was distressing to see so many people leave Prescott because we're so proud of it. They were. This is from the Las Vegas. I think it was called the Ford County Globe. You can see Wyatt's getting ready to go to Las Vegas, New Mexico. We've done some research in the Dodge City papers, and Tombstone never shows up. No reports of that. So that's one of the reasons we know Virgil. He learned it from Virgil. But he's headed to Las Vegas, New Mexico. Who's in Las Vegas, New Mexico? Is Doc Holliday and Kate. It's a mystery. Did he know Doc was there? Probably. Was there some correspondence? Don't know. It's not a big town, so they could have met by chance. But they were developing a relationship at that time, and I don't think they weren't that close yet. He was there in Las Vegas, New Mexico, sometime before September 23. Dodge City had a correspondent in Las Vegas, and this report came out that Wyatt Earp was here of Dodge City. He was a policeman, so he was known in that town anyway, Dodge City. So he somehow or another he picks up Doc, and Doc says, "Yeah, I'd like to go." Kate didn't want to go. She wanted to stay in Las Vegas. It's a nice town. If you haven't gone, it's a really nice town, especially those hot springs. That's a whole other story. But they actually played a part in healing Doc, and I tried them out. I felt really good after those hot springs. I can't explain it. So they took the trail, came across the what's it called again? The Chavez Trail. It's quite a ways there. Doc and Kate rode in the wagon with Wyatt and his common-law wife Maddie. I wanted to say this. You notice I put Doc and Kate Holliday. They actually called each other that. They never got legally married or got the license, or however you want to put it. So there's not that, but it did show up in the records a few times. Doc. The one time that you can see Doc calling Kate his wife was when he was building a saloon in Las Vegas, and in the land deed records, he had this added, and it made me laugh because I wonder why he had to add this about his wife, that he was making the decision to build a saloon with independent, apart from, voluntary, and without compulsion or illicit influence of his wife. So you can see he's calling their wife, but wonder why he felt he needed to say that. I think it was because there was some compulsion and illicit influence from Kate. She probably got her name because she nosed her way into other people's business, so he felt that necessary. So he did call her his wife. There in the Tombstone town, you can see there's a check over there, September 17th, 1881, about 6 weeks before the shootout, 75 feet from the OK Corral. And there was even a report. She traveled in a wagon, Kinnear's wagon. Kinnear's line, Kinnear, by the way, is one of those, his name was John Kinnear. He's one of those Prescott connections. He lived up in the Pioneers' home and died there. So, and this next August, the Wild West History Association has bought made a gravestone for him. So there's going to be a ceremony of putting this, because it's an unmarked grave. But you can see here, Kate Holliday, this was in March 1881. And Kate said it was this trek that made Doc and Wyatt such good friends. And this really rang true to me, because when I put the timeline together of the time Doc and Wyatt would have been together, it wasn't long. They met in 1877, Fort Griffin, Texas. Spent some time in Dodge City, but Doc was kind of sick and Wyatt was busy, so I don't see them inviting each other over for a barbecue or anything like that. But this is what she wrote. It was during our trip. from Las Vegas to Prescott that Doc and Wyatt became such good friends, to her dismay. I think she was a little jealous. And you look at the trail they took here. So Las Vegas to Prescott, there would have been a lot of stops. They're riding in the same wagon together. A lot of time to talk and get to know each other. So they formed a bond. There's been, we've always kind of assumed that Doc was going to go to Tombstone. That was his plan all along. I don't think so. And here's what I think happened. He was sick in Dodge City. He was going to the hot springs, the Montezuma Hot Springs, about 5 miles outside of Las Vegas, New Mexico. He needed some healing, and this apparently they had great, they called it consumption at the time. They had some great results at these hot springs. And he went there, started feeling better, started feeling his oats. But right about the time he got there, New Mexico outlawed gambling. Not good for a guy that, like Doc said, he was a dentist, but he preferred to be a gambler. And studying his life over and over and over like I've done, I think he was making that transition. He wanted to be a full-time gambler. And then he got in trouble. He was running a gaming table called Monty. He got arrested and fined for that. And then later in August, he got, I guess this is more serious, I don't know, he got arrested for gambling, and there was the bail for $200, and he paid it, and I looked up, they got those inflation calculators. That was about $6,000. That was a lot of money. So Doc had money with him. He inherited some money from his mother, who passed away early, and when he came of age, he inherited some money. Then he sold a business in Georgia as well. So the group of newcomers rides into Prescott, autumn 1879, right about this time, actually. So actually, the Wyatt Earp book says it was November 1, so it would have been right about this time. And when they came in, like I said, there was no fanfare. They didn't know who Wyatt Earp was. He was announcing it. Wyatt stayed about a week or so. It was really like a layover. So I always tell people, when you hear a Wyatt Earp story in Prescott, it's someone's making up a story, you know. But that's common everywhere you go. I've been to places and heard we were in Alaska and we heard a Wyatt Earp story, you know. So that we looked up and said that's not true. But so Doc and Kate, they stayed in town. Wyatt and Maddie and James and Bessie, his family, James Earp, the older brother, they stayed with Virgil. And Doc found lodging. This is the report that came out. This is one of the first times I saw the Earp name in the newspaper. This is dated November 14th, 1879, but it's actually was first reported on November 8th. There was the minor weekly, but there was also the daily. So in the weekly, they would report what was reported in the daily, and that came out November 8th. But he's on his way to Tombstone, and here you see an example of how they made fun of Tombstone. We don't like tombstones and shall avoid them as so long as possible. There was they didn't understand why it was named Tombstone, and so they made fun of that. Why would you want to go to a place called Tombstone? That's a little morbid. Ed Siflin, the founder, actually came to Prescott later, told them why. That he said when he was first started prospecting out that way, the soldiers at Fort Huachuca said, "You're only going to find your tombstone." And then the people in Prescott kind of went, "Oh, now we get it." So they didn't make fun of the name anymore. So it's just Kate saying they stayed in Prescott. She said that at some point, this is 50 years after the fact, so her sense of time had changed. And in a short time, Wyatt sent Doc a letter, said he could do well as a dentist. And you can see there that they started out after. I think this was several months after. But we did a study on that. We looked, Sue Kissel looked and found how many dentists were in Tombstone at the time. There were already 5 dentists in Tombstone. We did a study about dentists in Prescott at that time. 1. We could only find 1. I went through the entire census. He listed himself as a dentist, and there was someone else. But so he could have done better being a dentist. There was more opportunity in Prescott. this is from primary source, and I'm trying to find, where did I get this? But someone who was an eyewitness said they camped there into the early spring of 1880. I think it was sometime in March, so I actually think it was very late winter. So Doc's at the crossroads. Does he continue to practice dentistry? And by the way, he never practiced dentistry again, at least that we know of. I have a sense that he carried around his bag, and if he needed money, he'd go, your teeth don't look good. You want me to work on that? And he'd get a little money there. I have a sense that he might have done something like that, but he was deciding what to do with his life. Plus, Kate and Doc were arguing about Tombstone. Kate didn't want Doc to go to Tombstone. She didn't like the herbs. She thought they were a bad influence. But when he came here, what I wanted to say here was that I think Doc's original destination choice was actually Prescott, because the gambling dens in Tombstone, it wasn't a gambler's destination yet, and he was a gambler. But Whiskey Row had a reputation for that. That's the place to gamble. So Doc and Keena were arguing. At some point, they actually split up. And I call this Doc's deception or Kate's denial. I think it's probably both. But they split up, and here's what happened. Well, she wrote here, you can see what she wrote. If you're going to Tombstone, to the Earp brothers, go for it. I'm going to go to Globe. She wanted Doc to go to Globe. And she claimed that he went on to Tombstone. But here's what happened. They took they went down toward Gillette, which is, there's hardly anything left there anymore. But Gillette was the headquarters for the Tip Top Mine and a stagecoach stop. So they go down there, and there's a picture of Gillette. Another picture taken by Doc's photographer, D.F. Mitchell. She told, there's 3 sets of memoirs, which I'm going to tell you about. They come in 3 different parts. And she told 3 different stories about this time. And she wrote a relative that they just left Prescott, went to Tombstone. She left out all the Globe part. Then on the other one, the second one, she said that they went to Gillette, Tombstone. They split there, and she went to Globe, or they went to Gillette. I think it said that. They went to Gillette, they split up there, and Doc went to Tombstone, and she went off to Globe. I don't think that's true. I'll show you why in a minute. The one that rings true is this one, the last one. First of all, just remember, Doc didn't go for Tombstone right away, so she was either being deceived, or she never knew, or she was in denial about it. But she said she stayed there. Doc went to Tombstone, and she went over to the mine a few miles away, the Tip Top Mine, and stayed there for a week. If you know something about mining, who worked in mines? Men. There was some money to be made over there. So I think, and there's actually evidence that she had a little money when she got to Globe. And I think she went over there, did some business, made a little money, and then went. And I think that was the first thing she said. And then her other memoirs, she changed it. And I started thinking, did she figure out that we're going to figure that out at some point? So she goes to Globe. They split up here. So Doc went back to Prescott. And the reason I'm showing you this, if they would have split up, it would have been here at Casa Grande, because that would be the natural splitting up point. And that didn't happen. And then she went to Globe. So I think she went over to the Tip Top Mine. Then she said, I didn't hear from Doc for a while, which spoke volumes. Like I said, in denial. But I think they split up. I think they had officially broken up. You know, when you break up with someone, you don't talk to them. And it was months and months and months. So Doc went to Las Vegas, took care of some business there. He owed a carpenter some money for building the saloon he had there. He paid that up on April 24th. So sometime after that, he headed back to Prescott, and he shows up on Montezuma Street. There's the census report right there. The census went for the entire month of June, and this was on June 2nd, so they were one of the first to be counted in the census. You can see the 52 there, so it wasn't a house number. It was they were the 52nd house to be, what do you call it, when you census somebody, you know, that they registered or checked into. You see he lived with Richard Elliott. He was the house owner. just wrote a big article about him. He was a man of many hats and was here in 1864, at least working out in the mines. And John Gosper, who was the Secretary of Territory, and the whole time Doc was here, John Fremont, who you know wasn't a very good governor, but he was our most illustrious governor, he wasn't here, so John Gosper was acting as the governor, and Doc was living with him. So that's a whole interesting time. Oh, and I tell you, we did a plaque. So we did that. There's my man Stuart right there. We brought his name's Corey out. He's a Doc impersonator. He did a great job. So they reunited in Tombstone in late 1880. Something Kate was chasing him, but I think Doc was short of money and Doc needed some money. That's just my theory I'm working on. She used her name after, the whole thing in Tombstone happened, the OK Corral thing. She accused him of something that he didn't do. So they broke up in Tombstone. But she kept using her name, and it's not often her name would appear like in delinquent tax lists or mail waiting, or she was on a stagecoach and she's passing through, and her name would come up. She said it was Kate Holliday, and so she used that until 1888. Then she marries a guy, George Cummings, in Aspen, Colorado. It always makes me laugh. I think about Kate and George skiing in Aspen or something like that. John Denver there or something. But married George Cummings. He was a miner, and someone was asking what happened to George Cummings. She kept that last name for the rest of her life, but they ended up divorcing, and they never divorced, I don't think, but Kate left him, of all things, because George was drinking too much. And Kate was a bit of a drinker herself, at least in her younger years. I'm looking at her later life, and I don't see any episodes of that, but there was, her drinking in Tombstone. And George ended up committing suicide, but she kept his name even when she came into the home. Now, here's where I'm getting into what I've been working toward the whole time there. She shows up. She almost had to beg. There were 100 other people. You can see 109 guests. 100. There was a large waiting list of more than 109 persons. It was hard to get in. And Kate wasn't a natural-born citizen. She was born in Hungary, so she wasn't that. But you had to live in Arizona a certain number of years, and she did. But she came in as Mary Cummings. So this is what Prescott looked like when she was here in 1879. There's Montezuma, that's Whiskey Row. So that's where Hotel St. Michael is right now. That's called that's called the Diana Saloon. You can see it there as well. There's Gurley Street. The house Doc lived in was right behind these buildings over here. There was a collection of buildings there. You see some other pictures. You can see a bunch of pictures there, but that's where the house was, and that's where the plaque is. Today it's Spashford Courts. And then she saw Prescott the way we've seen it. She must have been flying a drone here or something. I don't know what she was doing, but the courthouse was here. You can see St. Michael, the palace is here. So she saw what we saw. When she gets there, right after this was during the Depression, by the way, right after she enters the home, this famous book comes out. I mentioned the Depression because people were looking for an escape. And this was a good book to read. It was escapist. It was a lot of fantasy, a lot of historical fiction, actually. In that book was mention of her, and this is where you see her called Big Nose Kate. It was mostly ghost written, but, Wyatt Earp got Stuart Lake gets it here, but it was based on some interviews with Wyatt Earp, and it wasn't real kind to Kate. And this is the part that I love. They thought that Kate was dead, so they could say whatever about it. So this is where her time in the home becomes very significant. There she is as she looked. And this is Gary Roberts, who wrote the big old book on Doc Holliday. And you can see what he said here. So maybe the most important result of this book is that this little lady in the Pioneers' home in Prescott wrote her memoirs. You can see he says that an elderly woman at the Pioneers' home. That's Kate, Mary Cummings. I just threw this in here right here because Kate's she's work, and you'll come up with some reasons here, but a lot's been written about Kate. A lot of it's wrong, but part of that is because a lot of what's wrong came from Kate. You know, there's a lot in her. Sometimes she was outright lying. Other times you're going, that rings true. So, but Gary Roberts said they're very valuable, but it's like doing some placer mining. I guess that's how you say it. You know, where you're sifting for the nuggets, and you really have to do it. And I'm still in the process of doing this. So some of the conclusions I come up, I'm still working on. But they do appear. I call that Kateology, working on figuring out Kate, and I'm still developing that. The memoirs that she wrote came in 3 parts. And the story of how they came about is interesting, but they were lost for a while. That's a fascinating thing too. So the first section is a rebuttal. She's debunking a bunch of the things that were in the Wyatt Earp book about her and about what had happened. The second one, she's actually writing for publication, but it's still a rebuttal. She wants to tell her story. You can see here it says, I'm very old and I would like to set those stories straight before I pass. And then the most interesting one to me is the one she wrote to a family member. So let's get to those. So it started with this guy, Anton Mazanovich. He's a story in himself. He was actually part of the Geronimo campaign. And that's what my master thesis was on, so I was familiar with him. But he had met Kate in Globe somehow, and I don't know how he knew, but he knew she was Mary Cummings and that she was Doc's woman. He finds out, somehow he knows she's there. I don't know if they've been corresponding or whatever. That's all. I'm still looking into that. You never know if something might pop up. But he sends her the Wyatt Earp book. She reads it up there in the home. Sometimes when I'm driving, I come in from the south and I'll look up there and I'll imagine Kate reading through their book just fuming, going, I'm going to get this guy. And she starts corresponding with Mazanovich and tells her story. Like I said, they thought she was dead. This is an 1896 article that came in the San Francisco Examiner, William Randolph Hearst newspaper. And there was a ghostwriter, and I think his name was Robert Chambers, but this is during the yellow journalism, and so a lot was added. But you can see it was written, poor Kate, Frontier Whiskey must have laid her low long since. They thought she was dead. You know, don't worry about her, she's gone. She kind of was lost to history, but she was there. She was out there, going as Mary Cummings. There's the example. This is quite a story of getting these this TypeScript here. I put out feelers for getting it, and it's almost like I walked into a minefield of sorts. And this, I got to a point where I literally was praying. I want these memoirs real bad. I had written the Haley Memorial Library in Midland, Texas, and forgot all about it because they wrote back right away and said, "Oh, we don't have it." I saw it in the end note that they were there. A year and 2 days later, I wake up, there they were in my inbox. It was like, how about that? And that's the actual TypeScript that Mazanovich had. And you can see her purpose here. This is what he wrote, Mazanovich. I will now give you some pointers on Wyatt Earp's last life story. Mrs. HolliDaze is referring to Wyatt Earp, Frontier Marshal by Stuart Lake, which you sent me to read. I will disprove some of the outlandish lies contained in that story. And she believed there were lies about her. Mazanovich took what she wrote. He published an article. It was a series of articles in the Brewery Gulch Gazette, which was the Bisbee newspaper. And then he apparently kept at it. This is kind of a new discovery. I went down to Tucson and picked up some Mazanovich letters. And you can see here he wrote on February 7, 1934, yes, I had been in touch with Doc Holliday's wife for some years. And she goes on to what he's saying, but that gave me the impression that he was going to do more work, maybe an article or a book about Kate. He died a few months after this letter, and I never got around to doing it. So the next part of the story comes with a Prescottonian, Rose Martin. She lived on the corner of down that way where Park is a Park Avenue and then Grove and all that, where you got to zigzag around. She lived on the corner there of Gurley and Park. And she had been going up to the Pioneers home. And apparently that's just something she did. She will go up and visit the folks there. Maybe she knew some people. She befriended Kate. And she noticed that people were trying to get her stories. She starts urging her, write your memoirs. We'll get them published. You write them. And there was these other people coming after her trying to get her story, but they wouldn't give her any money. Kate didn't want to do it for her. She wanted the money. She didn't want someone else to get the money. So Rose was telling her, write them up and we'll see what we can do. She knew Dr. Bork. Now, he wasn't Dr. Bork at the time. He was a grad student at University of Arizona. She knew him to be, an intellectual, and she actually wrote him saying, can you help me with this? And I want to get her memoirs published for her. So Bork came down, they interviewed her up in the home. He took a bunch of notes. Rose Martin, this was kind of a cool discovery. I always wondered what interest did Rose have in Kate? And it comes out, this is her obituary, and her nephew and niece-in-law came to the funeral, and you can see here, it's kind of hard to read, but they don't give the wife's first name, but Miss Brady, formerly Miss Brady, her mother, she claimed, after the OK Corral thing, and the Clintons and the other guys, cowboys, were hunting the Earps. Virgil got shot and wounded, and then Morgan got assassinated. She claims they were going after Doc too, and she saw the Clintons. She's on the streets of Tombstone. She's holding this lady telling the story, the Miss Brady. She was a baby. She saw that. She had her baby in the arm, and she said she walked in front of Doc, and the Clintons saw that, and they didn't want to shoot him because they would have killed her. And I passed this around some of the experts, and said, yeah, that's very possible right there, because they were hunting down everybody involved in the shootout 75 feet from the OK Corral. So they tried to, they visit Kate up in the home. Kate gives Dr. Bork the handwritten notes. His wife Nadine, who's quite a character, intellectual herself, types up the memoirs. They give Kate the handwritten ones back to her, and they took it. Remember, they used to make carbon copies. They they typed it up, made a carbon copy out of it, tried to sell it. Nobody was interested. Dr. Bork filed it away and forgot about it. He was working on his doctorate, and he went off to Southern Illinois to become a professor and forgot about it. So Kate died not telling her story. She wanted the money. What did she really want? She wanted the money more than the respectability is what happened. So they were filed away and lost to history for a while. And then this guy comes along, one of Stewart's favorite guys, right? Glenn Boyer. Do anybody know about Glenn Boyer? Glenn Boyer was for a while, the darling of the Earp world. And he was a good writer, but as time went on, he started citing sources that weren't real. He was making up stuff. He got caught, and everybody kind of jumped out of there for good reason. He was kind of an ornery guy himself. He actually brought a gun into a meeting one time when they're talking about him, and it got nasty, I guess. But the thing is, even his enemies said he was a great researcher. I stand to get criticized just by mentioning his name. That's how he's looked upon. He's just a pariah. But he did some great research, and he was still, how did Gary Roberts put it? He was still doing it right when he was doing the Kate thing. And here's how it happened. This is 1970s now. Remember Kate's memoirs, they're lost to history. Professor Harwood Hinton, he was a professor at University of Arizona. He was also the editor of a journal called the Arizona in the West, a scholarly journal. He had told Boyer that, I have this letter on file that says that there's Kate's memoirs are out there. And I think it was the letter from Dr. Bork from years back. He told Boyer this, and you can see, I have talked to Bill Bork several times about the Big Nose Kate manuscript. He says he has looked and looked for him, but he couldn't find him. And this is 1974. Later, here it says, Bork says he's been trying to find them. There was also a picture. He tried to sell it years ago. So 74. So they're looking for this manuscript. But I put this up here because I understand why Dr. Bork couldn't find these. That's the historian. I took this picture. I was organizing all my files, and then I go, wow, let's take a picture of it. And that's what it takes to get to the truth sometimes. And that's just some of them. But, after I wrote the book, I filed them away in a cabinet. I've gone to look for stuff later that I know are there, and can I find them? I find everything else but what I want to look for, But I understand that. What happened was Boyer was working on this book here, I Married Wyatt Earp, which is supposedly Josephine Earp's diary, her own story that she had. And he worked on that. It was put out around 1976. 1976. It even became a movie. And up to the Tombstone movie, she says she was an actress, that she moved from California, joined a acting troupe, and then became an actor. And that story lasted for years. I'll tell you some of the real story. It's pretty sordid, so I got to be careful with that. But Maria Osmond played the sweet Josephine Earp. Yeah, it's out there, and it goes from that book. And Prescott's in this movie because she said that she came to Prescott first, and she did. She actually did. So he puts that book out, and he goes back to looking for this manuscript that was out there somewhere. And she wrote. He actually put out a few articles, one in Davenport, Iowa, but one to Prescott. He wrote, "We're looking for these memoirs. Does anybody have any idea?" It even says that the professor has been looking for him, Professor Bork, and there was a photo as well. And can you help us? And this is June 1976. Finally, it came about. Dr. Bork found the manuscript finally. You can see what he wrote here. He found it in November 1976, had his notes on it, and he also found the famous photo that we see all the time. That photo is in the archives right there, and maybe a copy of the very one he found, and the negative. They're in the Boyer collection right there, and I held it in my hand. It was kind of cool. But that's how that photo came about. It was lost. It was lost. They published Kate's memoirs in spring of 1977, and that's the first time that Kate's story was put out. And the people of Prescott were going, "You're telling me Kate HolliDaze was up in the Pioneers' home? We didn't know it?" That's what happened. Very few knew who she was. It was never ever reported until Boyer did this. Those came out, and you can actually get these online. If there's certain repositories that store these manuscripts, but you can get this. It's called JSTOR, JSTOR. You can actually look it up. They make you pay money though, as they do. So here's what happened with Josephine. Long story short, she made up the story. She says she joined the Pauline Markham troupe, came to Prescott. She just had stage fever, and she told the story. It worked for years, but people started going, things, they don't add up. And even some of you remember Tom Collins, he passed away recently. He was the expert on Arizona theater, and he kept telling me, I can't find Josephine Earp anywhere. And what happened was a friend of mine, Peter Brand, kept at it. It was just, 2023, an article came out, and then he put this book out, self-published, guy's from Australia. He's a fascinating guy himself, but he tells this true story, and it's irrefutable when you read it. You can get it on Amazon. But what happened was there was a lady in San Francisco, her name was Hattie Wells. Her specialty was recruiting underage girls for prostitution. That's what really happened. So you can see why she wanted to hide her story. She kept her story out of the Wyatt Earp book, and until then. And do you know we're having a Doc Holliday? We're Peter Brand's going to be one of the speakers at the next Doc Holliday. We do an interview style, so that'll be fun. Boyer puts out this book later. This is when he was under attack. When he started going off the rails. He told the story about how Kate's father was the private physician of Maximilian, the Emperor of Mexico, and that was easily debunkable, and it was real quick. And the most fascinating one to me, or the set of memoirs, is what she wrote. I said that's her favorite niece. Her name was Lillian Rafford. She was the daughter of Rosa. And so when this book came out, Kate's relatives were going, I think Aunt Mary might be Big Nose Kate. So they were talking among the family. So Lillian contacts Kate, and she goes, yeah. And she wrote Kate, this is months before she died, and it's still very lucid, wrote a 19-paragraph letter. Like I said, it was very lucid. It had mixed up facts. She's telling the story 50, 60 years later. Very lucid, and she wrote this letter to Lillian, and where they found it was after Lillian died, shortly after Kate did, and they found this letter inside her copy of Wyatt Earp. The whole world didn't know it was there. And when Boyer started looking for info on Kate, they said, you might be interested in this. And that's where it was. And that was really interesting to me, because now she's leaving her legacy with the family and telling her story. She wasn't doing it for publication. It was just a private letter to Lillian. So a little bit about Kate, and I'll wrap it up here. But what we found out is she was born in Hungary in November 7th, 1850. Her birthday's coming up. She was married Catherine Haroni. They came across the Atlantic on the Bremen. It was a German ship. Something I noticed the other day, when you don't notice until sometimes when you're practicing for something like this. She was listed as born in Germany, and later on in the census, she listed her birthplace as Germany. So I kind of wonder if maybe that's what she actually thought. But that was 1860. They end up in Davenport, Iowa. Her dad was a physician. You see right here, his office was on the downtown Davenport, probably. And then, tragic. This defines Kate to me. I think it's been emphasized enough. So Kate's mother, Katharina, died on March 11th, 1865. Kate is 14, Mary at the time. Kate was 14 years old, lost her mother. Then, can you imagine this? About 6 weeks later, her dad was gardening, didn't feel well, came in the house, passed away. She lost, at the age of 14, she lost her mother. She came from another country to a strange place. She lost her mother and father within a span of a month and a half, and she's 14 years old. It gets worse. But there's the grave marker there. When I was doing post-grad work, I was a teacher for too many years. I did post-grad work in education, and two of the courses that interested me the most were on learning theory. And I remember something about a certain age where adolescent girls were the most trouble in the age. And because it really stuck out to me, because I was teaching middle school at the time, and the toughest students to deal with weren't the boys, it was those girls. Those girls were tough. And as a man, you're like, boy, you could get really tough with, but you felt so bad when you're scolding, a girl, they cry and stuff, but the age, anyway, you see, I found this study here that the riskiest age for a teenage girl was 14 years old, which is what Kate was. And you can see here, there's a turbulent time. She needed parents. Parents were being warned here, pay attention to your girl, they need you the most. She didn't have any parents at the time, but it got worse, because when they split up the orphans, they split them up, and Kate was removed from her siblings. She was the oldest. first impression I got, knowing this was turbulent time already. I think she was incorrigible. I think they thought she was a bad influence on the rest of the family. They separated her and they kept moving her about. And this is some of the results that can happen just from being separated from your siblings. And it was about, adoption and splitting up brother and sister, brother and so on. But some of the ones that stood out here was stress, of course, guilt, loss of identity. Think of all the names that Kate went through. Kate Elder, Kate Fisher, on and on and on. She kept changing her name. There's an attachment disorder that comes with that, and difficulty making attachments. Some of that meant that they try too hard to make attachments, and it's tough on them. They need something to latch on to, a family type thing, and I think she tried that with Doc. This is a picture of her sisters. For years, it was said that was Kate, but it's been proven that's not her. This is Rosa and Wilhelmina. Kate was 5 years to 6 years older than Wilhelmina on the top there, who was actually Lillian Radford's mother. And you see these two look very close in age, and the difference between Rosa and Wilhelmina was 2 or 3 years. And then Kate up and leaves. Somebody went looking for her, and he said, well, we can't find her. She's gone to parts unknown. She just left. And some think she might have been sexually abused or something like that. And there's a copy of the handwritten note where it says, we're unable to find her. Her whereabouts are unknown. Next time she shows up, it's in St. Louis in the census. She changed her name to Kate Fisher and listed her birthplace as Germany. And you look up here, her occupation, they didn't mince words back then. It doesn't say whose. It's hereditary. It says who. Inside joke. And there she's in St. Louis. Now, she said at a certain point that she was sent to a convent and raised by nuns after the death. I think she pulled a Josie Earp and made up that story. I'll show you why here in a minute, but yeah. One thing, St. Louis was kind of going through a time there where they're trying to figure out what to do with prostitutes. And one of the things they do is they take them off the streets, put them in the asylum. I think that's probably what happened. Then she made up a story that she married a guy named Silas Melvin. He was a dentist. And they got married, she got pregnant, and she lost her baby. That's the story she told. I started looking at Silas Melvin. There he is, Silas Melvin. He wasn't a dentist. Where did he work? He was an attendant in an insane asylum. So I'm thinking that's probably where she met the guy. I'm almost done, so. I told her to keep track of me because I lose track of time too. I think she might have met this guy, had an affair, and had a baby, and lost the baby. Silas Melvin was already married. Talking about she was in trouble in St. Louis. You see there, she's arrested for assault and battery. At one point, she actually says Mrs. Kate Fisher, but that's what she would do often, say she was married when she wasn't. She was granted a permit to be in the insane asylum. And I think she actually asked to be in there. But there's a list of some of the trouble she got in. And this is shortly after her parents' death, so she's still going through that. And back to Prescott, when she was in the Pioneers Home, again, she's not saying she's Kate Holliday. So she actually reunited with one of her brothers after 70 years. She made a rug for him. It was apparently very beautiful. They took it, displayed it in the Burmester, where the Bashford Court says that they did a report on it. Again, no mention of being Kate Holliday. As you know, she's buried in the Pioneers Home, and this is when they found out, wait a minute, that was Big Nose Kate, so it's actually got some wrong information on it as well. There's her death certificate. She passed away, no mention of Doc, and for years, no one really talked about it till Boyer found her manuscript. And here's some myths about Kate that you'll hear. it wasn't like in the movie where Doc stabbed a guy and they fled off to, that story's not true in the first place. It never happened anywhere. But they didn't flee to Prescott after Doc stabbed someone. That was the movie. They didn't go to Tombstone together. This is a Wikipedia that she practiced prostitution in a hotel room above the palace. And as you know, actually there was no palace when she was here. So obviously no upstairs. Even when there was a palace, there was no upstairs. But someone, like I said, people make up stories. There was that she bribed Governor Hunt to get into the home. You read her letters to Hunt, and she's just begging, and you can tell that she doesn't know who he is. But the story is that she had some dirt on Governor Hunt. So okay, I'll let you in. That didn't happen. And there was a rumor that came about that she was the first one to be admitted to the home. Again, they didn't know she was Kate Holliday in the first place, but the women's section of the home had been around for 15 years. So there was a story she influenced other women to come in and everything, and that, of course, is not true. I'll put this up real quick because similar stories. They both became prostitutes. They both made up stories. The difference is Josie came from a good family. I mean, her parents were alive, and she broke their hearts and left. Kate went from a bad situation. You can kind of understand why she ran away. Hey, I'm done. Thank you.